Today's podcast is about two tragic cases of senior women who disappeared into thin air. In one of the cases, we can understand the circumstances that caused them to vanish, but in the other case, we just don't know anything that happened on that day. First, let's talk about Lily Mae Huff. Lily Mae Williams was born on June 1st, 1915, in Virginia to Felix and Wilkie Williams. She had 8 siblings. In December of 1935, at the age of 20, she married Olin Huff. The couple made their home in Dryden, Virginia, and would go on to have 6 children. Then tragically, Olin Huff would pass away in 1979 at the age of 66. Lily Mae Huff would continue to live in Dryden, Virginia after her husband's death. She would live there alone until late 1986. She had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, so for her safety, she was placed in the Welcome Haven Nursing Home in Winchester, Virginia in December of 1986. The nursing home had precautions in place as Lily would sometimes wander off as a result of her Alzheimer's. But one day, those precautions would fail. September 6, 1988 started out like any other day. Lily had breakfast at 9 a.m. with a friend of hers from the nursing home. After they were done, the friend left the dining room. One of the attendants checked in on Lily, and she was fine. When an attendant returned back to the same area 15 to 20 minutes later, Lily Mae Huff was gone. There was an immediate search for Lily, first inside the nursing home, but she was nowhere to be found. It is believed that she left through the patio door in the dining room, as that was the only door in the nursing home that led outside that did not have an alarm. The nursing home said that the time that she left was one of the few times during the day that she wasn't in a jerry chair, which is a wheelchair with a tray locked across the top. The search for her would then expand to the grounds of the nursing home, but there was no sign of Lily. Authorities had to at least entertain the theory that Lily Huff had been picked up or even left with someone. A top-rated canine did pick up her scent outside the nursing home, which was expected after the search inside didn't result in her being located. Family members didn't think that their mother got visitors outside the family, so they ruled out someone she knew coming to get her. They did say that Lieutenant C.C. Hale of the Winchester Police Department would visit briefly with Lily when he was at the nursing home visiting his own mother. Authorities, family, and volunteers would take part in a massive, intensive search of the Winchester area using helicopters, bloodhounds, Civil Air Patrol, and even hot air balloons. Lily's son Curtis Huff posted 2,000 flyers around the area. Lily Huff's family would also raise and offer a $5,000 reward for information leading to their mother's recovery. Police would say they believed that she could be staying with friends in either Wise or Lee County. Curtis Huff said that his mother had lived in Dryden, Virginia for 30 years and had often talked about going back there. He said that his mother did have relatives in Dryden, including a 65-year-old sister. A woman came forward who had gone to church with Lily for 15 years. She said that she saw her in Pennington Gap not long after she disappeared. That was more than 350 miles from Winchester, where the nursing home was. Police couldn't imagine how she could have gotten that far, though. Her family didn't believe that she was even capable of that kind of travel in her condition. A month after the disappearance, the nursing home that Lily Huff had disappeared from would add to the reward, making it now $10,000. They were still convinced that she was alive and thought that upping the reward might result in more calls of possible sightings. Curtis Huff said that he had no complaints about the care his mother had received while at the nursing home. He said that he and his sister planned to work with the Northern Virginia Alzheimer's Association in providing better facilities for people suffering from Alzheimer's, especially those who are prone to wandering off. He said that it may sound cruel that his mother needed to be restrained, but it was the best way to handle her when she wasn't receiving one-on-one care. The administrator of the Welcome Haven nursing home would talk about Lily Mae Huff and her daily schedule. She would get up at 7 a.m. and have breakfast. If she was too sleepy to change her clothes, they would just put a dress over her nightgown. After breakfast, she would join the other residents who sat in the hall and waited to be bathed and dressed. After her bath was done, she was placed in the jerry chair and would spend the day looking at magazines, talking to the other ladies, and watching TV. Lily had been given the depressant Mellaril to keep her from becoming agitated and spent most of her days and evenings in the chair, with the staff getting her up every couple of hours to stretch her legs and use the restroom if needed. She remembered that Lily Mae Huff was generally a very pleasant person, but in the throes of her Alzheimer's, when she had bad days, she would get agitated and wanted to walk and walk and walk. They would keep her up late at night so that she would sleep through until morning. She said that it was an adult home and not technically a nursing home. You would need a doctor's recommendation to enter a nursing home, and that wasn't the case at Welcome Haven. She went on to add that this is not a jail and that residents are free to come and go, and people were in and out all day. Lily Mae Huff had now been missing for 3 months and no clues had been found. Her son Curtis Huff, understandably frustrated at the lack of clues, was quoted as saying, "You wouldn't think in this little old town of Winchester that a little old lady who could barely shuffle along would totally disappear. It's kind of crazy, ain't it?" Huff was a pilot and he would make weekly air searches in a 30-mile radius of Winchester. The police in Winchester said they received calls about twice a week from people who thought they had seen Lily Huff. The Winchester Police Department, as well as Curtis Huff, were also contacting television shows like Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted to help spread the word about this disappearance. They heard back from both of the shows. AMW said that Huff's disappearance wouldn't be featured, but that her picture may be shown. Unsolved Mysteries told the Winchester Police Department that the story wasn't mysterious enough. It was also stated that the show Missing Reward had been in contact with the Huff family about possibly producing a 30-minute segment on the missing senior. 6 months would now pass, and there was absolutely no trace of Lily Mae Huff. The reward for information would be up to $15,000. Curtis Huff and Lily's family continued to do everything they could think of to find their mother. They would go door to door with reward posters, and the posters were hung in retail outlets in several states. Huff would continue to write all of the major news networks, hoping that someone would air their mother's case. Then the 1-year anniversary of the disappearance would come and go with still no answers. Investigators were at a standstill and would say, "There are still no clues and we have nowhere to turn." Curtis Huff's efforts with the media would eventually pay off. He was in regular correspondence with the Unsolved Mysteries show, and they made the decision to include Lily Mae Huff's picture and a brief description of her and how she disappeared to their Missing Persons Roll Call segment. The show aired in October for the first time. It is unclear of the response for the first airing, but according to newspaper reports, after the second airing at the end of January in 1990, the Winchester Police Department was swamped with calls after the national airing with phone calls of people who thought they had seen her. They received calls as far away as Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Washington State. In October of 1990, Lily Mae Huff's family would file 2 lawsuits of the senior home's owner, D. Wayne Fletcher, charging neglect in the disappearance. The first suit was written on her behalf, and the second suit was written on behalf of her estate in the event that she is declared dead before a judgment is made. Each suit asked for $500,000. It is unclear what happened with the lawsuits. There was an article discussing Lily's disappearance on the 3-year anniversary. Although the Welcome Haven home and Huff's relatives had posted a $50,000 reward for information, it hadn't produced results. On September 17, 1991, Lily Huff's children filed a petition in Winchester Circuit Court asking her to be declared dead. Their wish would be granted, but not until 6 years later in 1997. Curtis Huff would regularly buy space in the local newspaper and post a picture of his mother and information on her disappearance and implore anyone with any information to come forward and give his contact information. It appeared that his efforts may have paid off. Curtis Huff would receive a letter mailed to his residence. As soon as he read it, he rushed it to the Winchester Police Department. Finally, almost 4 years after her disappearance, could there be a substantial clue to what happened to his mother? The 2-page handwritten letter was postmarked May 4, 1992, and addressed to the family of Lily Mae Huff. It did not have a return address. It read, "I was at Safeway the morning your mother disappeared. As I came out of the store, I noticed your mother out in front of the store. She was walking over to each car and putting her face close to the driver, as if she couldn't see well, but was looking for a familiar face. A truck pulled up with young people in the back, and they were laughing at your mother wandering about in her nightie. Just about then, an older couple came out of Safeway and were walking to their car when the woman took your mother by the hand and put her in the back seat of their car. As your mother was getting in, her robe or gown or whatever it was raised up above her knee, and the woman reached over and pulled it over her knees. I have no idea who they were or where they went. Sorry I can't be of more help. I didn't realize until I got home and heard it on the radio. I hope I haven't added to your pain. I just wanted you to know that your mother was alive, disoriented, and left Winchester. She left Safeway with the couple. They had a nice car and seemed very considerate. I don't believe they would harm her." The husband seemed a bit surprised at his wife's action. The woman drove the car. They were about middle 60s. I couldn't say what exit they took leaving Safeway. The reason I was paying attention was somewhat that your mother looked so pathetic and lost. I think if that couple hadn't picked her up, I would have, and sincerely wish I had. I really am not any help, but I wanted you to know what happened that day. Your mother looks like a lovely person, and I'm hopeful there may be a happy ending for you all. God bless." The Winchester PD investigator L.W. Milholland would discover the identity of the letter writer not long after the letter was mailed. It was a female, but he would not disclose her identity. She reluctantly admitted to him as being the letter writer and said that she did not want to get involved, which is why she did not send the letter right after the disappearance. But when she saw the ads that Curtis Huff would place in the papers, and it seemed that police were begging for information, she decided to write. She would also add about the sighting that the man, who sat in the passenger seat of the mystery car, was wearing a suit and tie. Milholland would also say that the day after the letter was published in the newspaper, that he received a telephone call from a woman who said that she also saw someone matching Huff's description about 8 a.m. that morning in the Safeway parking lot. She said that she was wearing glasses with initials that matched Huff's, and the elderly woman got within inches of her, but the caller ignored her and went into Safeway. Milholland, on the day the letter was published, also received a cryptic answering machine message from a woman from West Virginia who said that she had information on Lily Mae Huff. However, despite repeated calls to the number, he could not reach the woman. It is unclear whether the caller had actual information or it was a crank call. Sadly, years would go by and still no trace of the beloved mother and grandmother. There would be an article in the Winchester Star that talked about the 13th anniversary of the disappearance. They said that the earlier sightings had been discounted and that Lily's son Curtis Huff, who had worked so hard to find his mother, had passed away in 1999. To this day, no trace of Lily Mae Huff has ever been found. I have known about this case for years, ever since watching the Missing Persons Roll Call on Unsolved Mysteries. Speaking of which, as a special treat, I thought I would play the audio of the Missing Persons Roll Call for you guys. Robert Stack briefly mentions 10 missing persons cases, one of them being Lily Mae Huff. As far as I know, this segment has only aired on national television twice.
Every year, thousands of people are reported missing, and many cases remain unsolved for months and even years, leaving family and friends in the agony of not knowing what happened to their loved ones. To end our broadcast tonight, we will show you the names and faces of several people who have disappeared. Please watch closely, and if you should have any information that might help solve one of these cases, make a note of the case number before calling. In September 1987, Julie Wefflin was abducted from the Bonneville Power Station where she worked in Spokane, Washington. Julie's friends and co-workers have contributed to an $80,000 reward on her case. Stephanie Stroh was last seen on October 16, 1987 in Winnemucca, Nevada. She had called her parents in San Francisco from a truck stop to say she was on her way home. She never arrived. Kyle Clinkscales vanished in 1976 while driving from his home in LaGrange, Georgia to Auburn University. He has been missing for 13 years. Carlos Alvarez was abducted a year and a half ago from his home in Downey, California. His alleged kidnappers are his uncle Jose Carlos Alvarez, nicknamed Luti, and an accomplice Juan Carlos Cristo, nicknamed Yanko. Diana Braungart was described as a shy but very sweet and loving 18-year-old, devoted to her local Methodist church in Festus, Missouri. She disappeared on March 11, 1987. There is a $15,000 reward for information leading to the recovery of David Till and Brian Ogen, best friends who disappeared on a hunting trip in 1985 near Mayo, Michigan. In Philadelphia, John Simmons was just 15 years old when he vanished after returning home from school in September 1988. Lily Mae Huff disappeared from a Winchester, Virginia nursing home in September 1988. She is suffering from Alzheimer's disease and may appear disoriented and confused. David Thies was 19 when he disappeared 7 years ago in New York City. He would be 26 years old today. Susan Capel also disappeared 7 years ago, just 2 weeks before her 21st birthday in Newcomerstown, Ohio. If you have any information relating to these missing persons cases, please call our toll-free number, 1-800-876-5353. You need not give your name. If possible, please refer to the missing person by name and case number.
Now for my thoughts. This is such a heartbreaking case. The fact that Lily Mae Huff wandered off has never been the mysterious part of this case. She was placed in this home because of her advanced Alzheimer's and her proclivity to wander off. The mysterious part to me is how she was never found. She went missing in the middle of a town of only 20,000 people in 1988. This case had a lot of attention initially with an extensive 5-day search, but no trace of her was ever found. Then while searching this case, I learned about the possible eyewitness sightings. I must say, wow. I knew one newspaper article years later claimed that the possible sightings had been dismissed, but I can't see how they could have been since there are no other clues to investigate and no way to definitively say that they were false. I will say that it does bother me that it took this writer close to 4 years to even tell anyone. By her own admission, shortly after the sighting, she learned about Lily Mae Huff's disappearance. How could she keep quiet about something this important for this long just because she didn't want to get involved? That's absolutely horrible. If she would have come forward right away, then police could have gone to Safeway and interviewed regular shoppers and employees to see if there were any other sightings. Perhaps her talking about how nice the couple was that she claimed picked Lily Mae Huff up is just a feeble attempt to assuage her guilt at not coming forward sooner. I can actually see some validity in this sighting, although it came almost 4 years too late. This Safeway was only 0.2 of a mile from the nursing home, so Lily could have definitely made it there on foot. Also, the time of day of the sightings would match at the time she wandered off. The unique fact that one of the sightings mentioned Lily having monogram glasses, which she did, was noteworthy. Even Lily Mae seeming disoriented and looking lost and peering into vehicles, trying to find a familiar face, would make sense given her advanced Alzheimer's. The letter writer does have some pretty specific information in it, which lends credence to it being legit. I realize that some people do things like this for attention, but she didn't want attention. She stayed quiet for 4 years and probably felt guilty and wrote the letter. Then the police had to track her down, and she also didn't want to be identified. Also add to that another person who called in described seeing the woman at the same time and described her behavior the same way the letter writer did, which makes me think that both sightings are valid. If this eyewitness account is true, I find it a little strange that this mystery couple would immediately put Lily in their car and drive off if they only wanted to help her. The only reason they would have had to do that is if they wanted to take her to the Winchester Police Department or perhaps a hospital so that she could get help. But we know they didn't do that. What other reason would they have to take a confused elderly woman with them? I don't even need to answer that, but if that could be what happened to her, it is chilling. Lily Mae Huff has a headstone, but no grave underneath. Her name is etched next to her husband Olin. There is no date of death listed, but the date she went missing is. Her 6 children have all passed away, but she still has family members who want a resolution. We may never know what happened that day, but perhaps one day her remains can be located and placed next to her husband's grave, where her remaining family members can pay their respects and finally have the peace of knowing where she is. The next case we're going to talk about also involves an elderly woman. She would leave her house to go on a special errand one day, but she would never return. Nothing about her story makes sense, even now, almost 43 years later. Eva Hale, 79, was last seen by a neighbor as she left her Terre Haute, Indiana home in her 1983 white Chrysler New Yorker on Tuesday morning, October 15, 1996. Her errand that day was an important one. She was going to the Marco Cemetery in Greene County, Indiana. In that cemetery were the burial plots of her parents and 2 siblings who died as children. But there was a specific reason for Eva's visit that day. She was going to visit the grave of her brother, Clifford Hawk. Clifford had died 6 years earlier as a result of burns sustained at a brush fire on his farm. The 2 siblings had always been very close, and Eva visited the cemetery several times a year. She would sometimes make up special baskets with silk flowers to adorn her brother's grave. Clifford's birthday was in 2 days, so, given the time of year, Eva had brought a pumpkin with her to place by Clifford's headstone. Marco Cemetery is a very rural cemetery. It sits on a hill in the middle of flat farm fields and silos with a few scattered houses. According to Eva's son, Guy Hale, his mother felt safe at the peaceful cemetery. She grew up down there. It was her home. She'd even gone to school in Marco. Near the Marco Cemetery was the Hostetter family farm. Ken Hostetter and his brother Clyde were working on the farm that day. Then around 6 p.m., they saw something disturbing. There was a car parked at the cemetery that had been there all day. More disturbing was that no one was in or around the car. It appeared to have been abandoned. The Hostetters contacted the police about the car. Authorities arrived at the cemetery where they found the abandoned car parked in the cemetery's half-circle driving path. Inside the unlocked car, they found a purse with ID, wallet, and money inside. There were also her car keys found nearby on the ground. When checking the ID that was still inside the purse, police would identify the owner of the car, who was nowhere to be found. It was Eva Hale. Eva's son, Guy Hale, was notified, and in a panic, he and his family would leave their Florida home to visit the area where his mother's car had been abandoned. Meanwhile, the police would begin a full-scale search. They searched streams, fence rows, and wooded areas. They also utilized a helicopter equipped with thermal imagers that should have picked up a thermal image if Eva had wandered off in a wooded area. But no trace of Eva Hale was found. The disappearance was well publicized locally, and flyers were put up in the nearby town. One person did phone the police with a possible clue. He said that he drove by the cemetery around 1:30 p.m. on that day. He recalls seeing 2 women standing together talking. He also noticed a full-size dark-colored sedan, black or blue, that was parked nearby. The last person thought to have spoken to Eva was her good friend Dorothy Clark. She spoke to her the night before the disappearance. She said that they talked about her going to Clifford's grave the next morning. The pumpkin that Eva brought for Clifford's grave was found next to his headstone. Dorothy Clark would say that her friend couldn't carry anything, and she thought that Eva most likely had asked someone to carry it for her. If that was true, who could it have been? As police were investigating Eva Hale's disappearance, it brought to life a now disturbing theory. In just over 2 years, 5 women from around Greene County, Indiana, had disappeared. 2 of them were eventually found murdered, 1 was found dead under strange circumstances, and the other 2 were still missing. Could there be a serial killer at work? So let's talk about the other disappearances from the Greene County area. Rita Buffington went missing on July 28, 1994 from Bloomfield, Indiana. Rita was said to have suffered from a mild developmental disability. She married Johnny Buffington in 1991, but the couple were separated at the time of her disappearance. Rita was living with a friend who had reported her missing. On August 6, 1994, 3 fishermen in Linton, Indiana, found a badly decomposed, partially nude body in the Shake Lake in the Green Sullivan State Forest. It would take dental records to identify the body as Rita Buffington. An autopsy determined that Rita had been severely beaten and shot in the head 3 times with a small caliber handgun. They were not able to tell if she had been sexually assaulted. She had been in the lake for several days. There have been no arrests in Rita's murder. A suspect, Raymond Turpin, told police that a relative of his, named Leon Kester, lived with Rita. Another relative, George Kester, said that he and Raymond often went fishing in the area where Rita's body was found. Raymond Turpin is a suspect in the murders of other disabled women as well. Just over a year after Rita Buffington's murder, 44-year-old Pam Fodrell would go missing while walking to the IGA store in Linton on August 18, 1995. Pam was intellectually disabled, and it was said that she had the mental capacity of a child and the appearance of a teenager. Pam lived with her mother Irene, and she allowed Pam to walk to the store by herself that day, as it was only 2.5 blocks away. When Pam didn't come home, her mother Irene was in a panic. She went to the IGA store, where the employees informed her that Pam did come in, made a purchase, and then left. Irene would then immediately report her daughter missing. Efforts to find her were unsuccessful. Then 3.5 months later, on December 3, 1995, hunters in rural Illinois, 45 miles from Linton, would discover human remains in a sleeping bag. It would take dental records to identify the remains. Sadly, it was the body of Pam Fodrell. The autopsy on Pam Fodrell showed a horrific death. Pam had suffered blunt force trauma to the head and neck, as well as multiple burns, puncture and stab wounds, and internal injuries. It was apparent that she had been tortured. It would take 2 years, but there would be an arrest in Pam Fodrell's murder. In October of 1997, there was some activity in the case. 2 inmates informed police that a fellow inmate had been bragging about his role in several women's abductions and murders in the area, including Pamela's. The inmate's name was Roger Long. After questioning, he would confess to the murder and implicate 4 others. In addition to Roger Long, Jerry Russell Jr., John Redmond, Wanda Hubble, and Pixie Fowler were also arrested for the crime. With the confession, more details would come out about Pam Fodrell's murder, and they were absolutely sickening. I've chosen not to share most of them here, as they are just too graphic and disturbing. If you want to read up more on Pam's case, there's plenty online about it. I will give more details about the abduction and murder, though. These 5 individuals had talked about abducting Pam before, and seemed to be targeting her because of her disability. After Pam came out of the IGA, Wanda Hubble and Pixie Fowler were able to lure her to their van. They then brought her to one of the abductors' homes that was only a few blocks away. The various assaults on Pam were thought to have lasted more than 2 weeks. Pam was then murdered. They wrapped her body in a sleeping bag and put her in a shed on one of the killer's properties. After a week, the group worried that the smell may attract some unwanted attention, so they made the decision to dispose of Pam's body 3 miles south of Russellville, Illinois. Jerry Russell, John Redmond, and Roger Long were all given life sentences. Unfortunately, the 2 women, Wanda Hubble and Pixie Fowler, were given lesser sentences, 20 and 14 years, in exchange for their testimony against the men. A footnote that I wanted to mention, just to clarify what a complete waste of oxygen that Roger Long is. Back when Pam Fodrell was still missing and her body hadn't been found yet, her family had received a tip about a possible sighting at a grocery store in nearby Bedford, Indiana. The witness also mentioned the name of Roger Long possibly being involved in Pam's then disappearance. Pam's mother asked around and found an address where Long was staying. The lawn was decorated for Halloween. Amid the decorations was a fake headstone that read, "Rest in peace, Pammy bitch." Pam's mother would report to the police what she had found. They asked him to remove the distasteful display as they continued to investigate him. 9 months after Pam Fodrell's murder, another local woman would go missing. On May 19, 1996, 32-year-old Annette Michelle Stevens, referred to as Michelle, was last seen in the early morning hours at the Oodle Inn bar in Switz City, a small town in Greene County. Her car, a white Mazda RX-7, was found abandoned on Indiana 67 shortly after. Her purse and its contents were still inside the car. There would be a search for Michelle Stevens, to no avail. Her family did not think that she would have just left. She left her 2 young sons behind, as well as her mode of transportation. Then in 2000, Michelle Stevens' husband, Jesse Stevens, was charged with murdering his wife. They used witness statements to recount what had happened that night. Michelle was heading home as she said that Jesse was going to call her and he would be upset if she wasn't home to answer. Between 2:15 and 2:30 a.m., Michelle left the bar and headed toward home. Jesse was seen a short time later coming in the bar looking for her. According to a witness, Jesse told her that he found Michelle's car at the Oodle Inn and followed her. Police believe that Michelle stopped along the road and he beat her to death with a shovel. When the family found Michelle's car, they discovered that a shotgun was missing from the car. The gun had been in the car as late as 10 p.m. that night. After the disappearance, Jesse gave the shotgun to his girlfriend's son. Jesse Stevens would plead down to a charge of voluntary manslaughter. He admitted to killing his wife on the night that she disappeared. He also said that he took her body to the coal mine where he worked and buried it there. Jesse Stevens was convicted in early 2001 and sentenced to 45 years imprisonment, 15 years suspended, and 30 years served. After he is released, he will then serve 15 years of supervised probation. On a sad footnote, since Michelle's body was buried about 122 feet below the surface at the coal mine, it was estimated that to exhume her remains, it would cost around $5 million. That wasn't feasible, but the spot was marked by a surveyor's stake, and the family received permission to place a marker at the property. Less than a year after Michelle Stevens' murder, there would be another woman who disappeared. This time it was just across the Greene County line in the small town of Pleasantville, Indiana. On July 9, 1996, 88-year-old Audra Page would go missing. She was in the early stages of dementia, some sources say Alzheimer's, and was said to have rarely left her home in Pleasantville. She was last seen around 7:30 a.m. on July 9th at her home. It is unclear who discovered that she had disappeared, but she was reported missing that day at 3 p.m. The police would begin an investigation. It wouldn't take long, as just 4 days later, Audra's body would be found. She was found in the Richland Creek near Bloomfield. The autopsy would determine that she had died from asphyxiation by drowning. The coroner, Jeff Deckard, would not release other details from the autopsy, but would not eliminate the possibility of foul play. Audra Page, like I mentioned, suffered from dementia. She also had trouble walking and had to rely on a walker. It was said that she couldn't have even walked 1 mile, yet she was found almost 25 miles from her home. She was also found without shoes, yet the appearance of her feet did not indicate that she had taken a long walk. Law enforcement would consider Audra Page's death suspicious. Then just over 3 months later, and only about 10 miles away, Eva Hale would disappear. So with these murders and disappearances, all located close to the same general area, and all within just over a 2-year span, in 1996, authorities consulted with the FBI to see if any of these disappearances could be related. There was nothing that conclusively connected them, but there were at least 2 people that authorities looked at. One of them even confessed to 2 murders that seemed very similar to the disappearances of Audra Page and Eva Hale. The first one I'll mention is Orville Lynn Majors. He was from Linton, Indiana, which is in Greene County. He worked as a nurse at Vermilion County Hospital in Clinton, which is less than an hour away from Linton. He was one of the most popular nurses, especially among the elderly patients. Suspicion would start to develop when the death rate at VCH jumped significantly after Major started working there. The year before he started working there, an average of 26 patients died at the hospital each year, but after Major started working there, the rate skyrocketed to over 100. The ratio was shocking, with 1 of every 3 patients admitted to the hospital dying. Hospital administration would notice a correlation between the spike in deaths to times when Major was on duty. Majors would even joke about when the next patient would die. In 1995, a nursing supervisor would check time cards and discovered that Orville Lynn Majors was on duty for 130 of the 147 deaths between 1993 and 1995. She alerted hospital officials, who then called the Indiana State Police. Majors was suspended pending investigation. The Indiana State Nursing Board suspended his license for 5 years, citing that he had exceeded his authority by giving emergency drugs and working in an ICU without a doctor. VCH then fired him. After a 2-year investigation, Majors was arrested in late 1997 and charged with 7 murders, although investigators believe that he killed 100 to 130 people, the majority of them being elderly. Some of the witnesses testified that Majors hated elderly people, and he believed that they should be gassed. Majors was convicted of 6 of the 7 murders he was charged with. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive terms of 60 years each. Even though Majors got the maximum sentence under Indiana law at the time, Judge Ernest Yelton concluded, "The maximum sentence is the minimum sentence in this case." Orville Lynn Majors would serve out the remainder of his miserable life behind bars and died of heart failure in September of 2017. I can understand why authorities mentioned Majors in the conversation about possible suspects in this case. He lived nearby, was a nurse with access to vulnerable patients, and was said to hate elderly people. But I don't think that Majors is thought to have killed anyone outside the hospital, and of course Eva and Audra were not patients in a hospital when they went missing. So I don't see him as a strong suspect in these 2 cases. For the second possible suspect, do you remember Roger Long? He's hard to forget. He was the one that I mentioned earlier whose bragging to other inmates ultimately resulted in his arrest and conviction for Pam Fodrell's murder. There were 2 other women that Long bragged about killing. He said that he killed a woman named Eve. He said that he buried her in a cemetery inside the grave of a recently interred person. He was annoyed that Pam Fodrell's body had been found, but assured the inmates that Eve's body would not be. Of course, the thought is that the Eve he talked about could be Eva Hale. Long also took responsibility for drowning an old lady by placing her in the water, but he didn't mention a name. This may have been Audra Page, as the circumstances that we know could match. But there's also a chance that Roger Long had simply heard some of the details of the disappearance and death and bragged about doing them for attention. This October will mark the 30th anniversary of Eva Hale's disappearance. There has still been no trace of her and no real clues to go on. There's still some scattered attention for her case. In 2013, she was featured on a deck of cards as the 2 of clubs. The profiles on the cards are aimed at solving old homicides and disappearances in Indiana. They are distributed to inmates throughout the state in hopes that they will share any information they might know with law enforcement. I will mention that on Eva's card, her day of disappearance was incorrectly stated as September 15th instead of October 15th. Sadly, Eva Hale's only child, Guy Hale, died in 2022 and lived 26 years heartbroken and not being able to find or even find out what happened to his beloved mother. In a prior newspaper article, he tearfully said, "I think about it every day. She was a wonderful lady. We were good friends." As far as my thoughts on this case, first I'll talk about the other victims from around the Greene County area. It appears that there is at least a suspect in Rita Buffington's case, but no one has been arrested or has had to pay for the crime. Authorities are still working the case, and in an article from August of 2025, police were still asking for people to call in with information concerning the murder of Rita Buffington. As far as Michelle Stevens, it was eventually revealed that her husband murdered her. The way that he disposed of her body was especially cruel, burying her in a coal mine shaft where he knew she couldn't be retrieved, and denying her family at least the opportunity to lay her to rest. Jesse Stevens was released from prison in 2012 to begin his 15 years of supervised probation. However, in May of 2017, the state filed a petition to revoke his suspended sentence due to a new domestic battery charge. When Greene County Sheriff's deputies and the Indiana State Police went to serve the warrant, Jesse Stevens barricaded himself in the crawl space of a home. He was arrested and booked into jail with additional charges of resisting law enforcement, possession of meth and drug paraphernalia, as well as the petition to revoke his 15-year suspended sentence. As far as I can tell, he is still incarcerated. As far as Pam Fodrell, I just can't spend much time thinking about her case. What they put her through was so hideous, and it was one of the worst accounts of torture that I've ever heard about. The people who participated in this crime are subhuman. I am glad they were caught and locked in a cage, hopefully for the rest of their life. Pam Fodrell was definitely targeted due to her developmental disabilities. It was something that they had talked about doing earlier. The ringleader then seemed to brag about it. People who prey on those with disabilities are the lowest life forms. They want to victimize someone who possibly can't fight back or may be at a disadvantage, which makes me think they are definitely capable of targeting and killing the elderly. The death of Audra Page has haunted me ever since I found out about it during my research recently. It is so mysterious. She had no transportation, yet she travels almost 25 miles and drowns. It doesn't make sense. Even if her dementia played a factor in her leaving her house, how did she get that far? She would have definitely needed a ride. They did say that the coroner wouldn't release some details from the autopsy. He also said that he would not rule out foul play. Honestly, I really can't see Audra Page's death being accidental. I mean, I'm unsure of the circumstances of her actually going into the water. I guess that could have been accidental. But her getting 25 miles from her home without her driving, I believe was some kind of an abduction. Audra could have been in the water for possibly days, as she was only missing for 4 days before she was found. So we don't know of any injuries that she might have had. We also don't know of any possible sexual assault, as we don't know the full results of the autopsy. Sadly, an abduction is the thing that makes the most sense, given the circumstances of her disappearance and death. As far as Eva Hale, her disappearance is just heartbreaking. A sweet elderly woman wanted nothing more than to pay her respects to her late brother and adorn his headstone with a pumpkin. It appears that she did at least that, but what happened to her after? It was such a remote cemetery, and since she grew up in that area, she was probably known by the locals. The last place that she was known to be was somewhere where she felt safe and where her parents and siblings were buried. Is there a possibility that Eva Hale wandered off? Since we don't know exactly what happened to her, we can't say that it's not possible. But is it likely? I don't think it is. They flew a helicopter with thermal imaging over the area soon after her disappearance. If she was out in a field or a wooded area, chances are the imaging would have picked it up. It isn't mentioned anywhere that Eva suffered from any type of dementia or confusion, so barring any sudden medical emergency, it would not be likely that she would just wander off and couldn't find her way back to the cemetery in an area that she was very familiar with. As far as the one eyewitness clue, I don't really think it adds to the case. He didn't see anything suspicious, and seeing 2 women talking and a car parked at a cemetery isn't out of the ordinary. There weren't any more specifics mentioned about the sighting, but I'm curious if one of the women matched Eva's description. So what happened to Eva Hale? I think the most logical explanation is that she was abducted from the cemetery. It just seems so unlikely on one hand, and such a unique situation given how rural it was. But on the other hand, the fact that it was rural would make it a perfect situation for a predator. Add to that the fact that Eva couldn't have offered much of a struggle, given she was only 4 feet 11 and weighed 98 pounds. No one would see the abduction, and they wouldn't even realize until later that she was missing. So who could have done something so completely vile? Roger Long would have been capable of abducting Eva Hale for sure. Someone who kidnapped and tortured a woman with developmental disabilities for 2 weeks until he murdered her would definitely have been evil enough to abduct an elderly, defenseless woman from a cemetery. In fact, I think that Roger Long is a strong suspect for the death of both Audra Page and Eva Hale. He is certainly despicable enough, and the fact that he confessed to 2 or more murders and gave some details that match the circumstances around their disappearance and death makes him a strong suspect in my opinion. I know that killers confess to murders they don't commit all the time, but as far as I know, these are the only 2 besides Pam Fodrell that he confessed to. Lily Mae Huff and Eva Hale were fragile due to their age and frailty. Given they were outside by themselves, sadly could have put them at the mercy of anyone if there was a predator watching. We have absolutely no answers in either of their disappearances now decades after they were last seen. The hope is that their remains can be found and that we can know the answers for these tragic cases of the vulnerable and vanished. That concludes my podcast on Lily Mae Huff and Eva Hale. If you enjoyed it, please leave me a rating or review where you listen to your podcast. You can find me on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and YouTube Music. You can also find all of my original articles, as well as links to my most recent podcasts, on my website at Lost and Found Blogs. I also have social media pages under that name on Facebook, X, and Twitter. I have a Patreon full of little-known missing persons cases that you may have never even heard of, so check it out. You can reach me by email at lostandfoundpodcast@yahoo. And remember that cold cases stay cold because their story stops getting told.